Hi, everyone. Casey, welcome back. I'm glad you could join us again today and recap some of the things that we've been hearing about this this month and how it's going to impact our futures.
It's great to be back, Rich. Thanks for having me again.
One of the things, in my closing in the last piece was about, other exposures that were being impacted here. One of the things that we had a discussion group item about vacancy provisions and how they're impacting, could impact insurance as things drag on here. So do you have anything you'd like to comment on about that?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple of thoughts there, and this is pretty much regardless of which which carrier someone is insured with. But what we're seeing with some of the challenges with what's going on with COVID right now is that we're having properties that might be considered vacant or unoccupied, depending upon how the terms are going to be applied in the coverage forms. And because of that, when we see an extended vacancy provision that hasn't been addressed by the carrier, by the agent or the insurers coming to them and saying, look, we need some help on this. Can we get a vacancy permit or something of that nature? We have two issues. We have limited perils that may apply as well as we have a potential reduction in the payment of a claim. And those are the kind of things we really don't want to have occurring when our insureds, need us the most. So I've heard a couple of limited stories where some insurance carriers have said, look, we're not going to worry about vacancy provisions right now while we're going through COVID. But I think that's something we do need to be aware of in today's marketplace, that is a direct effect of COVID-19 and the potential impact on insurers, as well as, most importantly, from my perspective on working with the retail agents and brokers, on the claim side of things.
Thanks, Casey. I think it's going to be a lot of people working together to make sure people are taken care of properly on the vacancy situation. And, I don't know, any company that's going to have a hard line if under the circumstances, as long as people are there to watch things over and it's just not truly a inaccessible building. So it's part of it. Well, you have a couple of questions that are coming in. And one is about what are the largest exposures in farming that new technologies are being employed and will help with efficiency? Casey, can you think of any?
Well, something, Rich, you and I have talked about this for I don't know how long, right? Precision ag has been around for at least 20 years. And guess what we're still talking about in 2020? We're talking about precision ag. There was a study done a couple of years ago that said across the nation, at least 50% of the farmers are using at least one type of precision ag. That number is expected to grow. And relative to that is going to be the impact of drones. We've heard about this coming over the last few years, but I really think we're going to see a significant impact on drone technology and the big data that one can get to manage large swaths of land in very short periods of time in real-time data. The drone activity is going to be increased. That will cause us to have a couple of concerns. Is it a drone owned by our insured, or is it a drone used by a third party who's providing the service to the insured? Either way, we know the farm ag operator is going to be somewhere in the liability food chain. I don't too much worry about the actual damage to the drone, but the liability food chain that my farmer ag operator is going to be stuck in if we don't address that with some coverage, and or if agents aren't asking the right questions of their insureds, are going to cause us some issues. So those are two of the big issues I see in that regard that could, again, although we've talked about it for so many years, this is not something that's going to go away. It's going to come to the forefront, as you well know.
Yeah, and I think those exposures have been developing over time, like you said, the last 20 years with precision ag. But on the drone side, I'm running my drone up along the fence line, and I capture data from my neighbor's ground that's right next to us. They have a pollution event. Now attorney is asking me for discovery to see if I have any data over on that fence line and how that's going to impact it. Yeah, we're looking at all those and cyber concerns that go along with that. John Deere, they own their equipment, and so they're the ones that can work on it. You can't have outside people working on it. That's been an issue. But the farmer can always work on it if he's an electrical engineer, I guess. But not they're engineers. They're just not that kind of an engineer. They engineer a lot of different things. But I think over time that the development of these exposures have brought out some specialty coverages that we're working on at AAIS, and they're top of mind items. So we just got another question in here, Casey. With the ongoing trade issues with China and domestic markets on hold, is U.S. agriculture in another farm crisis?
Oh my God. How much time do we have, Rich? It's in a lot of ways, yes. I mean, I'm looking at the depressed corn prices and the decisions that some farmers are still making yet today about whether they want to plant corn this year or if they should go into soybeans. And that's probably not a great thing either. I was reading a brief little study the other day from a group called the Energy Information Administration. And they said that ethanol consumption is going to fall to 29 million gallons a day during April, May, and June of this year. Well, from that standpoint, that sounds pretty significant. But the standard number is normally around 37 to 40 million gallons a day. That's going to impact corn prices as well. So with trade issues going on with China, with decreased requirements for gasoline and things of that nature because of what we see going on with COVID, et cetera, that is a concern. And then the other thing that attaches to that is a recent study just released in the last 10 days or so by the American Farm Bureau that showed that their March 2020 data, right, shows that below the historical highs of bankruptcies that we saw in the 1980s, the Chapter 12 family farm bankruptcies for the 12-month period ending March 2020 were up 23%. Now that's during a time that was relatively good for farming up to March of this year. The concern is in Chapter 12 is essentially the Chapter 13 for family farms, if you will. And the largest increase we saw was in the Midwest. We saw some in Texas and California, but the largest increase was in Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska. My concern as I look at that in relationship to our customers, your customers, my customers, is how severely they could be impacted with everything else going on, and then having COVID-19 on top of that, and then depressed pricing, et cetera. It's have a nice day. It could be brutal.
Yeah, and on top of that, machinery prices have been high for the last few years, and there's some heavy debt out there on some of this equipment. When people are plumping down 250 to 500,000 for a combine, it's going to be really tight, and they can only share that with so many people because there's only so many hours in a day to harvest too. So, on the precision ag, if they thought they were going to harvest other people's corn to cut down their expenses and things, cut down their bills, that money might not be there because of what you said, them switching from corn to soy or not at all. And they might think it's best just to rest their ground. So, yeah, that's important. So, there's been a lot of things in the news recently about the chicken, beef, and pork processing and how that's affecting things. I know we were on a meeting yesterday where we talked a little bit with a beef producer about some of the price changes there. How is that also affecting the schedules that people have for, you know, their inventory and their value of their cattle and value of their corn that's in the bins all over the United States?
That's talk about a moving target, right? It's right now, cattle prices are depressed, right? Hog prices are depressed. Why? Well, we've got enough growers, if you will, ranchers of hogs and chicken and cattle, but it's bottlenecked at the processor with, again, what is going on with COVID-19 and the issues that they've got on the processing end. We have a very small number of major processing locations, and that again further depresses the price. This is not a good time to be a rancher from the standpoint of livestock. It's just terrible. And the values that they have are so tied to commodity markets and supply and demand. And we have a good demand right now. In fact, I saw a report this morning on the local news about, or national news actually, about rising prices in the marketplace. But as you and I talked yesterday to a cattle producer, he was looking at 97, 98 cents. I think he said a pound a month and a half, 2 months ago. And now he's lucky if he's getting a third of that, around 33 cents a pound. And it's not that he doesn't have the cattle. He's got no one to take them. He's got no one to slaughter them, right? He said if you wanted, you could go ahead and buy a 200, 300 pound hog right now. And if you could slaughter it yourself, you'd get it pretty darn cheap at 20, 30 bucks. Well, this is crazy. And that depresses demand for coverage. Insureds start to look at ways how to cut premiums. And then my concern there is they forget when things get better to look at and revisit those same valuations. So this is, again, a concern. But I got a question for you, if you don't mind my throwing it back to you, Rich, and that going back to your CEAs and your vertical farming. And you talked a fair amount about what they were raising and focused on, like leafy greens and herbs and that sort of thing. Why are they focusing on those types of products?
Well, generally they're focusing on those products because of the way they grow. They don't need soil. They can be grown in a solution. They can take nutrients from the air. They have controllable pests. The greenhouses have been around for a long time. We know how to control a lot of pest control there, and a lot of it isn't pesticide based. It's other tough forms of control. So it allows the multiple cropping. So you can change the nutrients that's on the bottom of the stack with what's on the top. You can supply more light to what's in the middle, and you can double and triple crop right within the same bed. And that bed, the base square footage is 10 square feet. So in a 10-foot high bed, I'm looking at a tremendous amount of area. When it's outside, there's nothing above it. You can't put another crop above it to multiply that acreage, and you're at the Mother Nature. Just take the weird weather we've had right now. A lot of cold in the Midwest now. Imagine if you had leafy greens out. Some of the cold crops, cabbage and things like that'll be fine. But some of the lettuce is just throw it away. And green beans, another one, might not make it because of the cold temperatures we had. Here in Gettysburg area of Pennsylvania, we were at 28 degrees 4 days ago. That's cold for May, and so we had snow flurries too along that day. So, you don't have that in those. And with the leafy greens a lot, you're not growing to a head size. Okay, like if it was a
Hmm.
pip lettuce or iceberg lettuce, you're not growing to get that head. You just want fresh young leaves, fresh young spinach that can be harvested, and another crop grows right back because you really haven't killed the plant yet because the roots are still there. So if you do have a die off, well, 40 days later you're going to have another crop.
I'll, reduce, reuse, recycle, eh? Isn't that what we were taught to do?
Yep. So we kind of hit our mark today, Casey. You know, as far as we've gotten through some good questions from our audience, and I appreciate you coming back and spending the time and updating everybody. The one thing I didn't cover, but I'm just going to take a brief second, is that, you know, we didn't talk about floods because we felt that they would be further over. But one of the things that I read in Missouri on the flooding, that a lot of more land is being put into either parkland or into farmland around the rivers instead of the houses. They're instead of rebuilding houses, they're buying houses and then putting it into parkland or selling it for agricultural production where appropriate. So, you know, that's the first I heard of it. We've been doing it on the East Coast here for houses on the beachfront. So it's nice that the Missouri River and the Mississippi are getting looked at the same way.
That sounds like a good use. I got to tell you one thing. It's there's a reason I stay on the West Coast. When you were talking about 28 degrees, I was thinking about the golf I was playing last week in 74 degrees. It was tough.
Yeah. Just put the dagger in my heart, Casey.
I do what I can, Rich. Thanks for having me again.
All right, you all have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed our conference.